All right, we're live. So yeah, we've got Kelsey Gustafson today. Welcome onto the podcast. I'm really excited. We got a really awesome topic. We're discussing goal setting strategies and how thoughts affect performance. So I'm excited to dive into that stuff. I think it's a crucial piece that's sometimes overlooked with what goes on in our brain, how it affects, how we play or how we live our lives. But yeah, Kelsey Gustafson, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danny. This is something I've been really looking forward to, just continuing to give more resources to athletes who may not be able to be in the financial space to, really afford speaking to someone one-on-one. I think it's really important to make sure that this information is still out there as a resource. So I'm glad to be a part of this podcast and this endeavor. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, I want you to introduce yourself. From my understanding, volleyball player, played in college, and you obviously studied, having your master's in sport and human performance, correct?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that's important to give context that you have a lifetime of experience as an athlete, and you have the educational background to now educate athletes on top of the personal experience. So yeah, if you want to just, I know you're from Michigan, right? Is that where you're from originally? I'll let you kind of
Yeah.
have the floor on introducing yourself. We'll put all your
Perfect.
information in the show notes as well. So
Love it.
your website, your Instagram, so athletes or parents can get in touch with you. But yeah, if you want to just introduce yourself,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing now and why you got into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first thing, I am from Michigan. Go Blue. I actually live in Ann Arbor right now. I don't know if it's always the biggest trend right after last year. We were on a high of saying go Blue, and now all of a
Yeah,
sudden, we're still loving them, but it's been a tough season. We beat Ohio State though, so that's always what
there you
matters, right?
go.
At the end
Yeah,
of the day. But yeah, I'm from Michigan. I've lived in Michigan my entire life. I'm 26. So, from a really young age, sports, much like everybody else's story, were something that my parents got me involved in. I lived in a really small community, very farm town-esque in the northern parts of Michigan, about an hour north of Detroit. And so sports have always been something that my life was really revolved around. And I played three main sports throughout my career in high school. So I did volleyball, basketball, and then I ran track and field in the spring. So by the time my senior year came around, I was kind of searching for what that really meant for me next. I knew I didn't want to give up sports, but I knew also that academics were going to be really important for me. I cared a lot about how volleyball wasn't always going to be forever, but I wanted, or, whatever sport I chose at the time wasn't going to be forever, but whatever I did after that, I wanted to make sure I had a good basis of education. So that led me down the Division III route. I found a school that I felt absolutely in love with. I loved their academia, and I knew that they would give me a really good path to carve out what I wanted to do with my life. So I actually chose to play volleyball out of all three of those sports at a Division III university here in Michigan called Albion College. And I spent all 4 years there, loved every minute of it. Through its ups and downs, I I definitely had my ups and downs, but for the majority, I really enjoyed my time there. And you get into that space where you're graduating from college and you're kind of trying to figure out what you want to do with life. I wasn't one of the lucky ones who went into college with an idea that completely stuck until I graduated. I actually wanted to be a nurse for the really like the longest time. And when that kind of fell through, I didn't have a passion for that. I was nearing my senior year and was really lost with what I wanted to do. And much like every athlete that I talk to now and past athletes, sports, when you grow up playing so many sports and you get so involved with the community, those are sometimes the only places you feel like yourself. Those are kind of the only spaces that you feel connected or a lot about things in sports. So I was really similar. I was like, I want to continue to be a part of sports. I know I'm not going to be a professional volleyball player, but I was getting my bachelor's in psychology at the time. And unbeknownst to me, my advisor was like, well, if you want to do anything in psychology, you have to continue your education. Like, you're not just going to get a bachelor's in psychology. And I was like, darn it. Well, I wish someone would have told me that first, but
hmm
all right, I'll push on. And so with those two kind of collaborating together, I decided to go to grad school for something that was called sports psychology. And I didn't really know a lot about it, in full honesty, when I was entering my grad school program in Chicago. I didn't really know a lot about what that really meant at the time, but throughout the process of taking these classes and courses and really kind of looking at it through a lens of what I could have used as an athlete in college, it started to become um, bigger. It made so much more sense why the field of sport and human performance or sports psychology, mental performance coaching is really a needed profession. And it was something that was really lacking in my opinion. And I think a lot of opinions, people's opinions in the sports industry and world. So I went to school for sport and human performance. That's just a fancy way of kind of talking about how we see how everything kind of impacts athletes from a sociological and biopsychosocial perspective. So, what I do now that I've graduated, I actually work at a private practice here in Michigan called Champion Mindset Group, but also I work for myself, owning my own business where I just work with athletes and teams on helping them perform more consistently, trying to help them navigate those deep crevices of their mind through maybe reaction and responding, how they handle challenges or setbacks, pre-performance anxieties, and all of those things in between. Just kind of letting them lean on me as a sounding board and helping them kind of dive into the research of why confidence, for example, is something that everybody believes people just have, but it's actually a skill that you can like learn and build. So we spend a lot of time creating confidence for going into new challenges or all of the things that I said above. So that's what I spend a lot of my time doing now. And yeah, it's been super fulfilling. I'm 2 years, about 2.5 now in the field professionally. So with that 1 year of grad school, I've had 3 years of deep learning of the profession, and it's cool because we get to have conversations like this, Danny, where you're going to ask me questions, and I might find something new just from your perspective as a hockey coach. Like, oh, it's so cool to see the inside view of like what mental performance is and bouncing those ideas off of each other. So I'm excited to get into the juicy meat of the conversation today.
Yeah, no, likewise. I think I think it's cool because I've always valued the side of sport and performance psychology, and I value people who are educated in it, but also have the experience and from their past in it. And I often see things with athletes from like, it's important to have that perspective that you can now give
Mm.
that knowledge. And I want to know like how often are you? I'm sure it's often. I don't want to speak for you, but how often are you like looking at these athletes that you work with or teams and you're like, I have these exact situations that I've been through. And I
Oh,
think it adds so much more value to what you're doing because now, when you have coach, like, I don't know, coaches can be, looked upon as like a separate from the team or just like this, like these like directors, right? But when you
yeah.
have someone who's part of it, like, hey, like I've been there, I feel like the athlete can now have a level of trust that they
Mm.
that they form a bond with the coach like yourself, and it helps with you know getting them
Yeah.
to that goal faster. But yeah,
Yeah.
enough with what I'm saying. Like, do you notice a lot that you're finding yourself like relating, and how important
Totally.
do you feel like that's been for the work that you do with teams and individual athletes?
Yeah, no, totally. I see myself in a lot of the athletes that I talk to. And to your point, Danny, like, yeah, it's definitely important that there is that trust aspect, right? I talk a lot about how I'll work with coaches, right? So it applies to myself, it applies to these coaches because we often see there's this power dynamic of coach and then player. And so, in order for us to kind of really increase the cohesion between the two, right, not having such a stark line that divides us, it always brings me back to a quote that I heard, and I can't remember where it's from, but it's so impactful. And athletes, especially in this generation, athletes don't care, or they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's something that
Mm-hmm.
I come back to often. Athletes are going to we all have a mechanism of survival, right? And if you're coming at me telling me information that I don't deem as something I can trust you with, I'm going to immediately close off. So it's important that we as mental performance coaches, everyday coaches with athletes, we show them how much we care, because once we open up that side of ourselves as humans, then they start to really take to the information that we're giving them. And so that's been a huge philosophy of mine as I've kind of increased with working with athletes is if I see something that I've gone through, a lot of times people really just crave that validation. like, oh, I've definitely gone through something like that and it sucks. That sucks. Like, instead of always trying to put a band-aid on something, sometimes we just need to talk about how bad it sucks in the moment, right? And we get that kind of minute out, and then we go on with our conversation of what we can control and how we can continue on and moving forward. But yeah, there are so many things that athletes come into the office or my virtual office just expressing when it comes to, poor coach communication. Like, I'm getting pulled off of the court and no one's telling me why. I feel like I'm having a really good game and I don't understand why I wouldn't be out there. Or I'm working on all of these things my coach is telling me, but I'm just not finding a place or minutes. And it comes from that confidence piece. A lot of times athletes struggle with confidence when they're in new situations. And so I really try to empathize with some of those things that I've gone through. And the only thing that I say is probably something I don't have a lot of background in is when I have some athletes come in with just, season ending ACL tears or just extreme injuries. I fortunately in my career of all those years through college, high school, and even elementary, I never had a season ending injury that required me to have surgery. I've had like a high ankle sprain, but that keeps you out for a few weeks. So those are really the only times that I can't relate. But the cool thing about my job and the cool thing about coaching in general is we get to learn from athletes. I don't know what it's like to have an ACL tear that takes me out of my senior year season, but I am so willing to learn what that's like and help you through it. So I think that there are things that I relate to, but I'm really open and honest with athletes when I talk to them about what I don't know, what I can't relate to. And that's often a time when I get to give them the autonomy to teach me something, which is really
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And like what you're saying with the coach taking me out, and there's a poor communication, and athlete not knowing like why that is, and helping with like the cohesion of that too. But I also think that the value in in the work that you do is that this is an awesome opportunity to utilize sport for an athlete to learn a life skill, right? Because
Hmm.
the thought that I immediately go to was if I was getting scratched the next night, I would take it personally and I'd go to an emotional place, right? And I didn't know how to react toward that or handle that. So I just did it to what my default was, which was get emotional, get upset, internalize, and then have it affect the next game, the next practice, and then just trickle.
Oh, I
Which
have
made which
something to say in that too. Sorry to cut you off, but I have this
don't no jump
amazing
in,
story. I
jump in,
have
yeah,
an
yeah.
amazing story that literally is so fresh on my brain, and I think it's really going to resonate with what you're saying, Danny. I had an athlete that I talked to literally last night. He plays soccer. He's in high school, and he's on this new, more elite team. He wanted to be on a higher level team because he has really big ambitions to play after high school and professionally. So he's used to being the captain and the starter on his
Mm-hmm.
team, and all of a sudden he comes in and he's like, "Kels, I didn't start this game," and I went in like at the like second half of the game. I'm not used to that. And I go, okay, well, what did you immediately do when that happened, when you heard your name not be called? And he goes, well, I started to think, like, what did I do wrong every single day this week in practice? And I said, do you have to be doing something wrong to not start every single time? And he looked at me kind of all like fuzzy eyed because kids don't get asked these questions, right? These are not questions that kids are used to. And I sat there and I go, think about it for a second. Do you have to be doing something wrong to not be a part of the starting lineup? And he was like, I guess not. And I said, why not? And he couldn't think. So we pondered on a few things, and kids don't think about these things. Athletes don't think about these things. I said, did you get to go in the game? He said, yeah. I was like, okay, what happened when you got into the game? Well, I was creating space for more of my teammates. We ended up scoring a goal. I came in and was just really working. And I go, do you think that maybe that was the plan? Maybe they didn't need you to start the game like that. They needed you to finish it like that. And you were the guy for that job. You see, but we immediately, like you said, Danny, we go to default mode. We start to think about what we did wrong, why this is a punishment. When in reality, it's bigger than you sometimes. it's a strategy. And you know this being a coach. Sometimes I have to put my kids that I know are going to be in the best position to start the game in those positions. And when push comes to shove, as coaching goes or as the game goes on, my coaching style changes. And now I'm putting those kids in the best positions to end the game. And so I think it's really interesting how we are just so deeply hardwired, and me too, like so deeply hardwired to immediately think of everything that I did wrong, when in reality, it might not be about you at all. So I think that that holds a lot of truth to what you were saying about that default mode of what we do as people, as human.
Yeah, well, no, I completely agree 100%. Obviously coaches have a job to coach and develop their players, obviously win games. And I think when you get to like the higher levels, like professional college, um, it becomes like that is their job. They do have families and they have to put the best players out or put players in situations that help them win the game and help them keep their job. And when they win, I don't know. It's just there's the whole system behind it, and I think we immediately, like the athletes, tend to immediately go to like, what did I do wrong? And then some, like some as in me, I would spiral and spiral and spiral, and now I'm out of the game. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So now I'm not focused, and so I think what the key value is now you can have an opportunity to through sport to give a kid now a tool that they can utilize in the next session when you're talking to them that they can utilize in the next game on how to now handle that bit of adversity in that moment, which, I want to go into like the goal setting topics and our
Yeah.
topic for the day. But what my point was is that sports psychology is a great outlet and mental performance coaching is a great outlet to have kids learn life skills through sport that they will have for the rest of their life when something happens in their job, in a relationship, with a
Mm,
boss, with like someone on the street at a grocery store, any sort of altercation. It allows them to now have the ability to emotionally regulate. They have tools to fall back on that
mm,
unfortunately I don't think are taught in schools.
yeah.
And a lot of a lot of parents weren't taught this stuff either. So this is a great avenue for athletes or kids to learn it through sport. And so that's kind of, um,
Yeah. Well,
you know,
how often do you hear, and I'm sure you've used this sentence before, like sports have taught me so much about life, right? Like time
yeah,
management skills, relationship skills, verbal communication. Like sports, we often always say when we're all said and done, like they taught me so much about life. And sports may teach us a lot about life, but they also have a really good way of exposing our blind spots. So
mm-hmm.
I think it's important to acknowledge that the blind spots are okay. Everybody has them. And if we can learn them through a game that we enjoy, then that's going to make us set up for success later in life. Exactly what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
life skill.
totally agree. But yeah, all right, let's go into goal setting strategies and how thoughts affect performance. So um,
Yeah.
I'm pumped about this. I think goal setting strategies are great. I think they help athletes kind of like really laser focus on what they got to do. I'm sure you'll dive into like all the action steps that go into just having a goal, how to set goals, and then the
Yeah.
thought affecting performance. I think is huge as well. I think it's such a key piece because there's a fortune cookie hanging up on my mirror every morning that I look at. You are what
Yeah.
you think about all day long,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's huge. Like how we think about ourselves, how we think about, our perspective on what we look at things shapes our reality and shapes our
How do
life.
I never get fortune cookies that good? Like that is a solid fortune cookie,
Probably,
Danny.
probably because you're trained in this field and I need it. So,
No, I
you
don't
know,
even mean that. Like mine
like,
always say weird stuff. Like,
yeah, because you're in this space, like you see this enough all day long that the fortune cookie gods are like, nah, Kelsey's good. She's gonna find this out some other way, and they're probably like, yeah, Danny really needs to hear this. Like, let's make sure this one's a good one for him. I don't know.
love it. I love it. No, my last fortune cookie said something weird like I don't even know. I can't even think of something, but they're definitely not as deep as yours. They're like
Yeah,
one sentence, like two words, and it's like be real. And I'm like, I don't what? Like, no,
yeah. No, I've got a fortune cookie drawer in my apartment. It's like all like the good ones. I always keep. So,
that's
yeah,
fun
they're good. I hope.
to
I
know.
wish
Good for the
many.
listeners to know too. Fortune
Yeah,
cookie drawer.
yeah, fortune cookie drawer. But all right, let's get into it. Goal setting
Yeah.
and thoughts affecting performance. Yeah, take it away.
Yeah. So goal setting is often something that's talked about like really a ton, right? And it's actually a really fitting time that we're filming this podcast because we're entering the start of a new year in a couple of weeks. And I think this is really when goal setting becomes a really kind of amplified topic. And so people get excited about what they can do and they really start thinking, putting things on the drawing board. And there's a couple of things that I say when it comes to goal setting. And everybody teaches goal setting different. Like if you look into the mental performance world, there are like several of my friends that I talk to weekly, and we all do something different because I think it's really just individualized the way that you look at it and the way that you teach it. So I think I think goal setting is a really important tool, right? Like it helps you kind of forward think in a positive way and almost to manifest some things. But it also is really important that when we enter a time of the year like right now, we have to keep in mind not making our goal setting completely overwhelming because we can get paralysis by analysis really quickly and we can start to feel like we have to accomplish so much at once, and then that kind of creates avoidance or more stress than we're trying to create. It's also really important, and the way that I almost structure it, the way that I was actually mentored to structure it, is really thinking about it in three tiers. So for anybody who's going to try and set some goals this year, this is kind of how I think about it, how I coach my athletes to think about it. But I think about it in three tiers. We have our ultimate goals, we have our performance goals, and we have our process goals. And so I always start at the top with athletes like, I want you to think about something that might happen in 5, 10 years. Like if you're a freshman in high school, where do you want to be your freshman year in college? Like what are you looking for after school? What are we hoping will happen? And kind of placing that out there in the universe, like really big things that's going to take some time to chip away at. Again, not unrealistic, right? Everything has to be within the range of those SMART goals, right? Like timely, realistic, achievable. But what's something that you want? Like if I am a freshman in high school and I am, let's say, on the varsity soccer team and I'm just crushing it right now, well, maybe my goal is to be at a Division I university playing soccer, recruited by a Division I university and committed by my senior year of high school. I don't know, something like that, right? And you can get creative with it. Like Clemson, that's where I want to go. And so that's really those ultimate goals are things that are going to take a while to chip away at, but they're big. They're important and they're big and they're shiny because that's what keeps us on the path. We want to go towards those things. Then performance goals, those middle tier goals, get a little bit more stats based, like almost like within this year right now. So as we enter the year 2025, what is a goal that you want to set for yourself where you would almost be beating something that you did last year? So for example, a couple of years ago, I got into running and I was creating goals for the next year. I had ran my first 5K ever in that year. And in the next year, I made a goal I was going to run two. I even think I got a little ambitious and said I wanted to accomplish 3 5Ks in this year, in this next upcoming year. So I took what I did in that previous year and I amplified it to give myself that forward momentum, something that was realistic. I'd done a 5K before I finished it. I could definitely do another one or two. So something like that. It could be points, it could be scores. Like if I had X amount of points this year, this last year, in this upcoming season, I want to score X amount of points, right? So you can kind of play that game with yourself to motivate yourself. Again, making sure that they're realistic and smart and timely, achievable. And then process, right? So we would create like three for each tier. So we would go from performance goals. We would have those hard set goals that we want to accomplish. Like, let's say I have some athletes right now who know the importance of putting on weight to be stronger for their sport. So they're saying, I want to put on 5 pounds this year in muscle. And so we would drop down to our performance goals. That's our first tier, our bottom tier. And our process goals are the things that we can do every single day consistently that are within our control to get us closer to those middle tier goals that ultimately get you closer to your big, big goals that you have set for 5 years from now. And so if I have an athlete who's saying, I want to gain 5 pounds this year in muscle, okay, great, killer, love that. What are you going to do? What's that going to take every single day? What's in your control? And I have athletes who will go as ambitious as saying, I need to do 10 push-ups a day for the next year. And I'll make sure that we consult and talk about like the realism of that and when we need to take breaks. But also I have athletes who will tell me that they want to increase their protein intake. And it can be simple as if it's not a goal to increase weight, it could be to be more agile. So they need to stretch more. And that means taking 3 days out of the week to really focus on a deep 10-minute stretch. Anything like that. Things that we can start to do more regularly that are very minute. They take only a few minutes, and they're very, very small. So we don't overstimulate ourselves, right? So it's things that are within our control because immediately, Danny, if I were to tell you, I need you to run 2 miles a day, is that achievable?
Yeah, it depends on what shape I'm in the year.
Yeah, right? Like every single day, right? Like even holidays, you still got to go,
Yeah,
like
I
every
mean,
weekend.
yeah,
Like,
it'd be right now. It'd be difficult
yeah,
with
it'd
the
be really
schedule and
difficult, right?
yeah,
And then the minute you sign up for that, you kind of like subscribe to that,
totally.
now you've missed a day and then you've missed
Yep.
another day. And now it's like, well, shit, I'm never going to get my goals. I'm not even doing the simplest thing. So then we can start to really deplete our motivation
Hmm.
and almost acceptance that we're going to achieve that goal. And it defeats the whole purpose. So that's why I always say goal setting is always different for everybody. That's kind of the more structured way to do it. But if we want to talk more about like everyday goals. Like I talk to athletes all the time about mini goals. Like I had an athlete actually come in last night who is one of my high school divers, and we were working through a mental block, and she had a coaching change. And not vibing with this new coach necessarily. And we talked about that connection she needs, building that relationship, maybe feeling a little territorial over that new coach being in the space of the old coach that she loved. And I was like, well, if you're craving connection, part of that has to come from you. When you walk into the pool, what are you doing? She goes, I ignore him. I was like, okay, well, sometimes you have to have that no ego amigo mindset, and we got to figure out what we can change. So I was like, what's your mini goal this week? What's something you can control that would get you closer to having that connection with this coach? And she goes, say hi. I go, every stinking time. Yes. When you walk in the pool, say hello. Like, because that starts to get you closer to the relationship you want. It's hard to have that relationship when we don't say hi. We're not personable. And you can control that. If this coach decides not to say hi back, like, that's his own prerogative, but you're doing everything in your control to get that thing you want. And that's a mini goal. It's not
Hmm.
hard. It's really simplistic, something she can do every single time she is in the pool. So that's an example of things that we would talk about for like a weekly basis, like what's your mini goal? And we just focus on one thing that will make a big difference if we do it consistently.
I want to ask you a question about like when you work with a specific athlete and how important it is to kind of know thyself and know the kind of player that you are. And I'm curious because I'm a big person. I'm a big believer in like whatever goal you want to achieve. You know, from a hockey coaching perspective, I'm gonna do whatever I can to help you achieve that. I'm not gonna ever tell you the statistics on there's only 4% of high school players that ever play college. Like I don't believe any of
Right.
that. Then you're just getting lost in all of it, and it's like I was in the percentage that would have been out, but because of my belief, it got me to where I am. Right.
Right,
But like
right.
it's hard to navigate that conversation. I'm assuming when you're having an athlete who's like, well, I want to score 30 goals next year. Well, historically speaking, you have 3 goals every year prior to that.
Mm.
Like navigating what kind of player that person is and how you help them shape their goals based off what type of player they are. Maybe they're more defensive, but they think in their head that they're a 30 goal scorer a year. And by getting 30 goals a year, they're going to now be recruited to Division I college of their dreams. And just kind of how do you navigate that conversation? How can, like what's something you could tell an athlete that's listening that
Mm.
on how to like properly set their goals and how to properly set their process tasks based off their goals and how to do like that internal like how to look internal maybe well what kind of player am I, Does that apply? Does that not
Yeah.
apply? Or are you just the type of coach that'll, or is it, um, is it part of the sports psychology world that like, all right, you want 30 goals? Let's do it. Or do you bring them back kind of, how do you navigate that conversation?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I have a couple things buzzing in my head right now, but I want to really stick on that thing, that last thing that you said. Like, what is it that I say? How do I approach it? And I think that this is really important for coaches of any profession, right? Like mental performance, coaching, sports, whatever it might be. And it's often hard, right? Like you know this kid only scores 3 goals a game, and now he's expecting to score, or it's 3 goals the season, and now he's expecting to score 30 in a season. I think there is that element of you can't fabricate something that's not there, but you also don't want to shut down their motivation, right? So it's really different in that conversation, Danny, if I have an athlete come in and is like, yep, so my stats are 3 on the season. Next season, I'm shooting for 30. Okay. Yeah. Like I'm sitting there and I'm just sitting, like kind of taking it in, right? Like, but there's a really big difference if that kid looks at me and I go, that's not going to happen. Let's bring it down a notch, buddy. Too ambitious. Or if I
Mhm.
go, that's really interesting. Why? Why do you want to score 30 next season? Why is that important to you? Okay, how can we get there? Right? Like the way that you approach conversations, again, going back full circle to what we talked about before, they have to trust in you that you have their best intention at heart. And sometimes that comes from the words that immediately come out of our mouth, right? But to go to your point, like a way that I would work through that with an athlete is the why tactic. Like, why is that important to you? Where is that coming from? Awesome. The next thing that we talk about, right, is dreams don't work unless we do, right? Like I can't sit here and tell you you're going to score 30 goals in a season if you're not putting in the work of someone who's going to score 30 goals, right? Because that's really different. And that's when we start to talk about things with statistics and results specifically with goals that makes a ton of sense. So we'll keep going with your example. 3 goals this season, 30 next. Awesome. Well, if nothing changes, why are you only getting 3 goals a season? Is it your playing time? Okay, well, if it's your playing time, you're not on the ice very often. That's already taking you away from scoring 30 on the season, right? Like that's a big factor. You're not just going to continue to be in the position that you're on and score more goals. Like I'd love to be the person that says that that's realistic, but sometimes that stuff's out of our control. So we have to make sure that we're still focusing. Okay, well, now the focus becomes not scoring 30 goals. It's how can I get more ice time? What do I need to
Mhm.
do to get more ice time to get me closer to scoring the 30 goals? And then
Mhm.
talk about things like that. Like there are so many times we have expectations for ourselves that are set so high, but we forget how many things are actually impacting those expectations, like the playing time, like the assisting from our teammates. Our teammates have to pass us the puck to get an attempt on goal. And if we want to think even further than that, Danny, we have to think our team has to be on the offensive side getting shots on goal more than defensively defending our goal. Like,
Mhm.
and that's all stuff that's volatile. That's sports. I can't control that. And that stuff impacts the 30 points, the 30 goals in the season. So it's really talking about what things could impact that, but again, approaching it in a way like it could. And I love that for you. I want that to be your goal. But maybe we need to focus smaller, like the ice time. How am I going to get more of that playing time? Or maybe ways like that. I don't know if that necessarily answers the question, but that's
No,
how I.
it does. I'm just curious, kind of like your thought process, the right thought process, and I think that makes sense because I don't think you ever want to knock somebody down from what their goals are, but how you navigate that conversation. I think that makes sense. Where it's like, okay, well, why do you want to score 30 goals, and how much are you like? Just kind of breaking it down and kind of almost like making them think about what they say. That way, they're doing the work through the questions that you ask and how you frame that
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
Kobe Bryant is a good example of that, right? Like being elite is simple, but it's not easy. And he was someone that stood really closely to that sentence that being elite was simple. I had to go to the gym multiple times a day. I had to do my stretching. I had to get my rest. I had to get up the shots. I had to do the rehab. And he did it, right? Those were simple things. He had to get to the gym by 4 a.m. Then he had to do his other practice. Then he had to go shoot at least 100 free throws, right? Like all of those things are simple. Most people don't want to do it. People want the success, they want the shiny thing, and they just don't want to put in the work for it. So
Hmm.
people like Kobe Bryant were a huge impactor in seeing that he was successful because of the things that he did that he didn't get awarded for, that
Yep.
ultimately gave him those rewards. So I think it's important to just think about those things as well. Like how much work are you willing to put in for your goals? Because
Yeah.
it's fine and dandy. Like life is not a spectator sport. You're not going to get what you want because you're sitting here watching it go by. If you want a goal, you got to chip away at it and do the things that's not required of you, which that's more of that kick you in the pants kind of comment that people need to hear sometimes, including myself, right? Like
Yep.
I need to tell myself that all the time.
For sure. No, I agree. And I think, no, that's all awesome information. I think it's super valuable. I like the process tasks or the process goals that you do every single day that help you kind of chip away at that because I think well, a lot of us get caught in like the big goal, right? And then we just kind of forget about, okay, like, yeah, I got to work hard, but what am I specifically doing to achieve that goal on a day-to-day basis? Like it's got to be specific. I think it measurable in that sense of like you can't just like be like I'm gonna shoot pucks. No, it's I'm gonna shoot 20 pucks every single day. You know what I mean? And then that way you can count it. And then at the end of a week, if you're like I only shot 3 pucks a day, or sorry, 3 pucks this or 3 days of shooting pucks this week,
Yeah.
well then look in the mirror. Like that's because a lot of us are just like, yep, I want this goal. Okay, well,
Yeah.
you have to write down specifically what you're going to do. I think it's awesome that you talked about those process goals because I think it's that's where like the like the beauty of it starts. Like that's where the
Yeah.
magic happens. So,
Yeah, and that
um,
self-reflection is hard, right? Like
yep.
it is one of the toughest things to look inward and maybe tell yourself that you're part of the issue or what you're doing or the actions that you're taking or not taking are a part of the problem or a part of the the block in the way. And so a lot of times I will have athletes come in and want something. And I again like the reason I do this job is because I care. I care so much about people in my everyday life that some people, my loved ones would tell you that I care about everything all the time to a fault most of the time. But I care about helping you get that. Like if that's something we're doing, like I'm jumping on the bus and we're getting on it together. But we have to look each other in the face and speak the truth to one another that there's some things we got to stop doing. There's some things we got to start doing. And you have to be really honest with yourself if you want things. And
Hmm.
that's the hardest piece because we have an ego and we want to tell everybody that they're doing the wrong thing and we're doing it right all the time. That's just how everybody is wired. So yeah, that self reflection kind of like soul searching piece is also huge when you're on an endeavor to doing anything. You have to be brutally honest with yourself. And I think that that's something that we forget a lot at the time.
Yeah. No, that's great. And that's awesome. Yeah. I want to segue into now how thoughts affect performance.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's do it.
I'm excited about this one. It's going to
Yeah,
be I don't know, really valuable.
yeah,
Like I said before, this is I think huge. So,
yeah,
let's dive
yeah,
into it. And real quick, I think it's so big because you see how kids get down on themselves and spiral, and then it's like that right
yeah.
there. What that internal dialogue is going to start to, and you notice it. Like the next rep, they make a mistake, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then the reps compound. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited. Let's dive into it.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm excited too. This is definitely something that I think my philosophy um has become more stemmed into. It's taken me quite some time, full disclosure, to figure out what athletes really need based on the conversations that I'm having. And they all really stem from this. So, and you're going to probably know this with yourself, and you'll see it with people that you coach, and it'll just be interesting. So, a lot of the times, right, like every single athlete that I talk to in some way, shape, or form is a high achiever. Like if they're in a sport that they love, that they want to be a part of, they are always trying to be the best at what they do. And to a fault sometimes, right? So we are always trying to just achieve all of these things. And that often creates such high expectations that when we don't accomplish something, we are immediately just upset with ourselves, right? So I think a lot of times when I talk about like thoughts impacting performance, it comes from a stem of a lot of different methods, but it comes from what you said, Danny, of like when I don't accomplish something and then my mind starts whirling and I start doing this tornado of bad thoughts and it just keeps going, that's going to impact everything I do from that moment. So we have to stop it, right? And one of my favorite things telling these high achievers and people, something I've learned for myself, thoughts are automatic. Like I am never like in a bad, terrible moment, am I trying to think about something bad? Like I am not like pre-wired to be like, ooh, okay, so when this really crappy thing happens, I'm like gonna think the worst possible scenario. Like I know that doesn't make me feel better. Everybody knows that doesn't make you feel better. They're automatic, right? If we want to talk about controllable and uncontrollable, your thoughts are automatic. They are uncontrollable. Now, what I do with that thought that pops into my mind and how I continue to just build the story off of that now becomes my control, right? Like I am now creating the problem. So, first thing that we talk about with athletes, or that I talk about with athletes, is when those thoughts pop up, sometimes they're just thoughts, right? Like there's a wild statistics that's always shared. We have around 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day on average, right? And now that's not considering what athletes might have if they have a game that day. So like 60 to 70 thoughts on average, 80% of those thoughts are negative. Like that really gives us a small margin of thoughts that are positive or productive, right? So we're always having those worst case scenario negative thoughts, and we have to remember that thoughts are just thoughts at the end of the day. Like if we're having 60,000 of them, that's a lot of thoughts to be having, and majority of them aren't true. They're untrue. They're just thoughts. So we start there, just thinking about those thoughts, those cognitive distortions, like what's coming up. Are those things even true? And then we start to talk about how those things are impacting us, right? So what story am I building off of that initial thought? So if I, let's say, I have a youth boxer who is really good at her level and her age. And we sit there often and we talk about those thoughts that she might be having. Well, before she enters the ring, all of the negative thoughts, the catastrophizing just starts, right? Like, what if I fall? What if my stamina is low? What if I lose? And I asked her, okay, well, those are natural, right? Like, I'm never going to shun you for having those thoughts. They're natural. We all think about things like that. But what I want to ask you now is how does that make you feel emotionally? When you're standing outside of the ring and you're thinking and you're just pondering all of those thoughts and you just keep going, how are you feeling in that moment? She was like, stressed out. And then I was like, okay, is being stressed out the way that we want to enter the ring? She was like, no. And I said, well, why not? How is that going to make you perform? And she was like, I'm probably not going to go out swinging. Yeah, because you're literally contemplating failing before you even go in. So there's a method in sports psychology called the TARE method, and it basically describes everything that I just talked about, how our thoughts impact our emotions, actions, and results. So it's showing how your thoughts are the literal punter of the result, the literal thing that punts the football through the field goal or you miss. Like, and it all stems from the narrative that we share in our head. So what we have to do if we can't control those things that are automatic, what we now have to do is we have to start to fight with them. We have to get into a space where we can kind of argue with those thoughts, or at least determine their truth, like their substance. And so a tip that I give a lot of athletes and something that I do for myself is if I ever find myself having a negative thought, like before I'm about to do something, I quite literally just rate it on a scale of 1 through 10, 10 being like, this is really likely to happen. It's happened before. It always happens. There's no doubt in my mind it's going to happen. And 1 being like, this has never happened. It's never going to happen. Rate your thought. right? So like my thought with my boxer athlete, well, I'm going to go out there and fall. Cool. On a scale of 1 to 10, what's the likeliness of that being true? She goes, a 2. Immediately, we've already knocked down the substance of the thought, right? Like that's a clear way of defining that has no space for me here. And I go, well, why a 2? She said, I don't think I've ever tripped, but I know it's possible. Okay, so you've never tripped. It's really not likely. So why are we thinking about it? And we never have an answer for that. So that 1 through 10 rate it rule is always just a way for us to just immediately place some substance or not substance to a thought that we're having, right? And then the next thing that you can do is just say why that's not true, right? So I was like, okay, so it's a 2 that you'll fall because you've never fallen. Why is it like not true? Why are you likely not to fall? And she was like, because I really spend a lot of time working on my footwork. Like I have really good footwork. Great. We've kiboshed it. It's gone, right? Like now we know I don't need to hold on to that. That's not serving me. So we've severed we've severed the chain reaction. That is now not going to impact my emotions negatively because I've thought about it differently. It's actually given me confidence. It's giving me maybe excitement. Like, oh, I've been working on my footwork and now my excitement is going to make me go out there in the ring and pound down, right? And that's going to shape my result. So it really just stems from simple things like that. Our thoughts have more power than we think they do. And if we don't have a strategy to kind of cut those things off, then it's not going to work in the end, right? And we see it time and time again with athletes. So we just need to make sure that we're taking that responsibility inside of our mind. But again, a lot of people don't know how to do that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And then my question for you is, what is something that you would tell an athlete? And sorry if I always go back to hockey. It's just the
No, I
only
love
thing
it.
it's like my been my life forever. So I
Love it.
apologize for being biased on that. But like, okay, kid gets off really bad shift. He throws the puck right to the other team, goes in, and as you know, which happens to most athletes, it's either the banging of the stick or yell out an expletive or just get upset. And
Mhm.
then you start to see them get in their head. You know, majority. There's some that are good at not doing that, but majority get in their own head. And then like you can almost guarantee if you're watching, the next shift is going to be terrible. Or, you know,
Mhm.
more times than not, it probably compounds. And the
Mhm.
brain starts overacting and they start, you know, getting upset and you know there's a visible emotional response.
Mhm.
What do you tell an athlete in that? That what's
Mhm.
a tool that they can do that they, you know, someone listening can maybe take with them and implement in their next practice or
Yeah.
implement in the next game that they have this coming weekend or whatever the case is, that
Mhm.
when they make that mistake and they get back to the bench or on the field if they make that mistake, um, on the court,
Mhm.
whatever it is,
Mhm.
what's like a tool that they can take with them right now to
Mhm.
break out of that like spiral into
Yeah.
being negative.
Great question. That's a great question. I think let's roll with that example of coming off from the shift and having maybe that body language reaction and
Mm-hmm.
the cursing. I think that that's really common. So if we kind of go off of that example, that takes us into that survival mode, right? Like we at a base level in our minds are just hardwired to survive. And so in those moments when athletes come off after knowing that they were in a bad shift and they're coming off of the I was almost going to say floor, but it's not, it's the ice. When they come off the ice, right now they're immediately in fight mode. Like it's uncomfortable. They knew they had a bad shift, so their fight mode kicks in, which is where that expletive or the slamming of the stick comes out. That's that reaction to kind of fight against the uncomfortableness of the situation and how bad they just did. Funny enough, if you ask these athletes, like if you go back again and again, this takes being honest with yourself. About 90% of the time when I ask athletes if they like the person they are when they react that way in front of their teammates, they say no. Like I don't like the way that I come off. I see this with baseball players, especially youth baseball players. I don't like throwing my helmet down on in the dugout and kicking the dirt and my teammates all seeing that. Like I don't like the person I am when I act like that. Okay. Well, so now we know we're not reacting in a way that we actually like. So then you're adding a little bit extra onto yourself. Now, this athlete that comes off the ice slams a stick, yells the F word, sits down. Now, the thoughts are going to continue to spiral. What do my teammates think of that? Did they just see me react like that? Did my coach see me react like that? Is that going to impact me going back in the game? What are my mom and dad thinking right now? You're adding more stress than you need to. No wonder you go back out there and have a bad shift because now you're trying to make up for your actions. We don't need to do that, right? But that's a reaction. We need to stop doing that. So that goes deeper, right? Like there's a couple of things that we need to talk about in regards to like why it comes to a reaction that way in our body language. And that's a whole thing I talk about. But to answer your question, Danny, like what are some things that kids can do right now? It is simply to just learn how to respond. Like instead of thinking about what you did wrong, it's almost we have to, like a dial, we have to turn down the emotions, right? You're in the middle of a game. Like there is no time to think, there is time to react. And if you didn't like the way that you just had your shift and you're going to go back out there, we're sure as hell not going to do the way we want to do if our emotions are cranked all the way up, right? Because the minute emotions crank up, critical thinking skills go down. Athletes will get in fights, they'll start shoving, they'll get penalties, whatever it is. You need to turn up the volume on your tactical skills. Instead of thinking what just went wrong and putting yourself in the past and ruminating on those things, I want you to start to think about what you could do differently. Your next opportunity out on the ice, what are you going to change? Stick to one, keep it in your mind, and do it to the best of your ability because that's what you can control, right? I can't control anything else, but I can control what I do next. And if it comes to that too, like it's important for any athlete to remember that the way that people are always watching, people are taking in information, right? And when you're a part of a team sport, if you're known as like that hothead and you're coming on the bench, everybody knows like the trust and the value in you as a player when you are just reacting that way diminishes significantly. Your coaches don't trust you to go back out there and make the right plays. They know you're going to be hot-headed and make some wild plays or penalties. It's going to put us down some. Your teammates don't trust you to get over it. That's not good. That's not what we want, right? So we have to do something with that. But the first thing that I would always tell athletes is crank the dial down on emotions, crank the tactical dial up. What's something that you can control and fix, and how are you going to do it when you get back out there? That's all we can do, right? Be a teammate. Be a teammate while you're on the bench. High five some people. Keep up the communication. But when you go back out there, focus on what you can change and make an effort. So that's what I would say.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. Do you know anything about like getting back? I mean, I agree with that, by the way. I think that's awesome. Like simplifying it to doing one thing and finding that one part of the game that makes you successful, whether that's moving your feet or
Yeah.
just trying to get back engaged in the game, right? Like, so I think
Mhm.
that's great. Uh, from emotional, like turning that dial down. Um,
Mhm.
what do you know about, or is it an effective tool to like get back into like senses and again,
Mhm.
like feel like your stick, like get back into? Because
Mhm.
for me, I'd get like, I mean, I would slam my stick or something like that, but my brain would just be like an amusement park of thoughts, just like
Yeah.
roller
Yeah.
coasters of just everything going all over the place. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Heck
to get
yeah.
out of your head, like kind of like wiggling your toes or like gripping your
Yeah.
stick or like taking a breath, would you suggest that those
Mhm.
are great ways to get out of your head and like back into the present moment to kind of stop the thought spiral?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There's two that I use that have really worked with a lot of athletes. And what I hear you saying, Danny, with the senses is grounding. So
Okay, yeah.
there's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. I think a lot of those, there's not a lot of time to use completely everything. And so I usually tell athletes just to spend some time when they come off. Our brain can't think about multiple things at the same time. It's just not wired that way. So if we really dive into our senses, what we hear around us, just closing our eyes on the bench for a second, like trying to pick out 3 different things that you hear, if it's the whistle, squeaky shoes, the blades on the ice, hitting the boards, yelling from the coaches or fans, something like that, just trying to find what you can hear. Again, like what are you feeling? So like, yeah, scrunching your toes in your skates, or like what the inside of your gloves feel like kind of rubbing your fingers on them, or like where you feel the pressure on your helmet on like your head. Like if it's pinching my ears, I feel more pressure on the right. That's immediately going to take us, if we can start that process sooner, because imagine if I go through that, right? Like I'm getting subbed out, like my shift on the ice is done. I'm giving myself a second to just like start to like feel where I feel pressure on my gloves, or like trying to hear the things going on around me. Okay, well, if I've picked out three things that I've heard, I'm already sitting on the bench. And now that's like a delayed reaction to slam my stick down. Like I don't need to anymore. Like it would just be an added theatrical thing to do because I'm not feeling it in that moment. So it's almost, we just need to separate the moments. And then also box breathing. Box breathing is huge. So this could maybe be more of a getting back in the zone type of thing in the moment, maybe less of the reactions. But I like to think of a box just in the middle of the screen, and it's just 4, 4, 4, 4 all the way around, doing it four to three times. And it's just breathing in for 4 seconds, holding, breathing out for 4 seconds, holding, and going around that box as many times as you need to kind of just regulate that central nervous system back to its neutral state, is a huge one. That's what I usually give athletes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's funny. Like, I'm sure you see it with the athletes you work with. I'm not sure what the age ranges are, but I coach anywhere from like 8 year olds up to, you know, college, beyond, whatever. But
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
cool, like the reactions from like once high school hits, it
Mm-hmm.
becomes the slamming of the stick and the expletive on the bench. But like the youngers, it's like the poor body language, the slouching, which there is some of that older, but and then like the emotion, like the crying and like the red face and like yeah, it's just do you notice the same responses too? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I
I have four
it
nieces and nephews, all under the age
okay.
of 13, and my nephews, right, and my nieces, like everything that they do, if they don't do it to the best of their ability, or they don't win, or whatever it is, like oh gosh, the tears and the slamming their body on the couch, and just a reaction, right? Like again,
Mhm.
just it's an emotion, and sometimes that can be helped. A lot of times it's the pressure you're putting on yourself that creates that in the first place. Like we notice a lot. I don't know if you've actually seen that viral clip recently of, I don't even know what they're doing, but they're like two kids, like either wrestling. The kid's got like a Cheeto, like wrestling unitard on.
Oh
And
no,
it's
I
like,
haven't seen this.
oh, it's two really little kids. And I might not even be doing it justice, but it's two little kids, like little boys who are like maybe 7, maybe 6. And so the little boy in the like Cheeto unitard is just like looking to wrestle this kid, and the kid on the
Hmm.
other end is just like this little cute kid, and he's like smiling the whole time, like must be his first time really doing it. And the Cheeto kid just like pushes the other kid down. And I'm thinking, oh God, this is where it ends.
Uh-huh.
The tears are coming. The kid pops right back up, looks at the Cheeto
Uh,
kid, and goes, like, gives him a thumbs up, like you did a really
oh,
good
I
job.
actually think I have seen this. I actually do think
Yeah,
I've seen. Yes.
yeah, and he gets right back up and he's like in it or whatever, but he like gives the kid a thumbs up. He's like, that was
Yes,
a
I
really
did
good
see that.
shot.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so you see, I think it's the pressure that you put on yourself. Like that kid you can see was just having the time of his life being there. And he maybe got shoved down, but he got right back up, acknowledged that that was probably a good hit, and just kept going, right? And so you see a completely different reaction based on maybe if he was a kid that placed so much of his identity in the winning and the reward and the result. If he would have been pushed down, he might have gotten emotional or aggressive. So it comes from what we place on our kids as expectations, we place on ourselves as expectations, because that ultimately determines how you react to things as well. If you
Yeah,
expect never to make a mistake, well, when that mistake rolls around, it's not going to be easy to take internally.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, um, yeah, no, this has been awesome. I always learn from things like this myself, so I think it's a never-ending process, and this is extremely valuable information that I hope anyone listening out there can take and apply with them. And I just want to thank you again so much for your time
Yeah.
to
Can
come
I
on
ask you a
here. And
question?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. What is your favorite thing about coaching athletes?
Probably the ability to change the course of someone's life. And, I had a lot of coaches that, um, matched my belief level in myself. And I noticed that my initial belief level skyrocketed because of having someone else who believed in me. Because I was a kid that wasn't ever good enough, but I believed in myself and that helped. But then when I had like that one coach or that two, those coaches that come into your life maybe once or two, three times in different periods of your life that match that energy to believe in
Yeah.
you, it's pretty powerful what it could do. And I was a recruited walk on to play Division I college hockey, and I was the kid that was never going to be good enough to play at any level of college hockey. You know what I mean? And that's a very big difference from playing at that level and not playing at all. And it's given me a lot of great experiences. It's given me opportunity to meet a lot of great people and play the game that I love at really, high levels. And it's sport has shaped who I am. Um, and so to be able to give that back to somebody who really loves it, and to kind of maybe alter the course of a kid, who really has a passion for something, I want to be a part of that process. And I had a lot of really great coaches. I had a lot of coaches that weren't the greatest. And so I want to be able to be the coach that can can be good and can, like I said, make that impact. And,
Mhm.
you know, yeah, I think it's awesome. I love it. I'm around
Yeah.
kids who
You
love
can
hockey all
tell.
day. Yeah.
You can
Thanks.
tell you love it just based on your answers that or your questions that you gave me. You can really tell that you're coming from a perspective of that you really cared about helping other people, like giving them the resources that they need. And you doing podcasts like this, Danny, is huge because the conversations that we have in here, um, I hope that they inspire you as a coach to think about things differently and reword them in your own words to talk to athletes and get through to them the way that you know how to. I think that it's really impactful work that you're doing to coach kids and to be that mentor in a lot of those scenarios. They need people that believe in them. So thanks for fighting the good fight out there. Good work.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you and people in your line of work because, I mean, you have it in your bio on your website that this is like the mental game is the missing catalyst or something, or like that piece of the sport
Yeah.
that can really
Yeah.
drive somebody. And I cannot be any more behind that statement because especially now with access to all these coaches and training, and it's more accessible than ever, right? But so everyone's really skilled at the sport. But
Yeah.
but if you don't have it between the ears to handle adversity, goal set, visualize yourself having success, it does not matter how good you are. And that's a shame because I've seen a lot of kids who are really good where something happened, they got kicked off a team for reacting poorly in a situation or quit because they were just so over it and the pressure. And even the parents, like there's a lot of great parents, there's a lot of parents who want the best for their kid, there's a lot that apply pressure or say the wrong thing. And it's like everything I think is between the ears in my opinion,
Always.
especially now. And so I just appreciate you and your line of work and your ability to like translate this to youth athletes and then the older athletes and then the parents, and like that ability itself is a skill. And so
Thank
it's
you.
just
I'm glad.
like I said, like it changes lives in my opinions, in my opinion. And so I just they're kids, they're the future of our world, and it starts
Heck
here. It
yeah.
starts with sport, and so
And
if we
they're
can help in any
way
way.
smarter and wittier than we were. So, and they're only going to get
Exactly.
wittier and they're only going to get smarter, which is why I always end in talking to any coach with that statement. Like, they don't care how much you know. They just until you show them how much that you care, because these kids aren't going to settle for bare minimum coaching anymore. Like these kids, I see it in college settings right now, like with my old college that I'm coaching or that I used to play at, but I do mental performance there. The trend of athletes that have come in the last years since I've graduated college in 2020, like They want to know why, how, where, all of it. And if it's BS,
Hmm.
they'll tell you. Like, so coaches need to be continuing to do their research on how to be better coaches, because these kids aren't going to settle for less anymore. They want emotionally intelligent coaches who are willing to coach them as people, not just athletes. And I think that that's important. So you're one of those people, and it's
Yeah.
cool. I appreciate you having me on here today, and um, just I appreciate giving the space for all of these athletes, and I look forward to having more conversations like this in the future together.
Yeah. Thank you. Likewise.
No problem, Danny. Well, have a good day. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Yeah. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.